Welcome to DiversiTV, the last show of Season 4, and it promises to be a great one. If you're just tuning in to DiversiTV, welcome. I'm Mark Harris, and I'll introduce my guests shortly. DiversiTV roughly coincides with the LCC academic terms, except for summer term, which we'll be actually doing reruns. So basically, we're in our 4th season, and our basic mission is to illuminate everyday diversity issues and give the mic and the camera to those who don't always get it. To that end, each season roughly follows the same format, more or less. And this season is actually pretty much indicative of that. We always start with the native perspective, because we're on Turtle Island, and that's just the way Maroons roll with that. You on the ground, the folks, you follow their traditions as much as possible while introducing them to new ones. The second show is often an Anglo perspective, because many of our viewing audience is Anglo, and so often they think, well, I'm just Heinz 57, I don't understand. Well, no, there's lots of diversity even within Anglo culture. Africans in America, Latino. May 14th we did hip-hop, which is an international movement, though we basically used a local artist at the time. GLBT, all that whole laundry list is gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, queer, questioning, intersex, two-spirit. May 28th was disability. June 4th is youth, and this week we'll be doing class. Actually, it's a different spin on class than, say, the Marxists might say, but that's how we roll with DiversiTV. Just to give you an advance on what we're doing in the summer, since I'm faculty and faculty typically don't work full-time during the summer, we'll be doing reruns. And our DiversiTV schedule will be Wednesdays, like the show is, usually at the same time slot, 6 to 7, and then rerun on Saturdays, 7 to 8 p.m. And so you can basically tune into all the shows that happened this season, plus a smattering of other seasons. And we may talk next term, which will start up the last week in September with brand new shows, or actually maybe the first week in October. We're still working that out. With how you can get previous episodes and maybe even web streaming, because this is the 21st century. So to talk about class issues, and the reason why DiversiTV focuses on class issues and why we're doing this particular spin. In the College of Hard Knocks, shall we say, some of us have PhDs. So when, if you've tuned in on my other classes, as I was telling my guests, I teach a 3-term African-American studies class in which we basically look at different types of isms. And so one of those isms is socio-structural violence, and that's type 6. And so those are those normal discriminatory structures of society which produce the largest numbers of disease and deaths. So even though, like last night, we had a black man attacked with by 3 white guys with baseball bats at 1 o'clock in the morning, skinhead style, that would be a type 1 focus of ism. The largest numbers of disease, deaths, disproportional incarcerations basically are perpetrated by the normal structures of society, and therefore the body count is higher there. So people don't usually think about that in particular. And so when you have disproportionality, one of the things you look for is you take a given portion of the population, and if things are happening to them at twice the rate of the population or twice the rate of other populations, then it's not random chance. Something is creating it. A social structure is creating that disproportionality. So for example, my famous, the statistic, black people are 13% of the U.S. population. We smoke 35% of the cigarettes, which means then, in terms of disease and deaths, if the Ku Klux Klan killed 10,000 black people in history, 50,000 black people die from alcohol and tobacco a year. All right? So you don't have to lynch them. They're killing themselves. right? So that's socio-structural violence, all right? And so another piece, so when we talk about the prison, go to slide, guys. The prison industrial complex, so called by Angela Davis and other people, because its motive is not so much punishment, consequences, and protection of society, and reintegration or rehabilitation into society, let alone habilitation, but it's profit. So thus, recidivism is as predictable as gravity and necessary to maintain the industry. And it's an industry with a self-maintaining profit motive. So you don't necessarily want to rehabilitate prisoners. You want them coming back because you need the money, right? So it's more expensive in terms of as a way of treating people than giving people the life skills they need to stay out of prison and being productive citizens in the first place. So even though it's more expensive and less and much more detrimental to society as a whole, it's maintained that way. So there is that profit motive, even if it's a state-supported institution. So this taken directly from our guest website, Native Americans represent less than 2% of the total population, yet comprise almost 4% of the Oregon prison population, which means that qualifies for socio-structural violence. That's predictable that that would happen, and if unfortunate. So in Oregon prisons, Native American women are more overrepresented than Native men, which again is another effect. It's not because there are more Native American women. There might be, but there might be structures producing those effects. So 1 out of every 30 Native people in Oregon currently has some connection to the correction system as a victim or as offender. Native people are more than twice as likely to be victims of violent crime, and Native Americans are more likely than people of other races to be victims of violence from a person of a different race. So most of these crimes are connected with substance abuse. So if most crimes committed by Natives are substance abuse related, and substance abuse is a medical condition, why aren't effective, culturally competent prevention and treatment services the norm rather than incarceration? Of course, I asked that as a drug counselor. Well, the answer that I would say, but you know, I'm a maroon, so you know, black people are always finding racism. Well, they're not rich and white because you know the statistics. If 80%, 72 to 80% of the illegal drug users in America are white men who make in excess of $50,000, they ain't going to prison, and it's not that they're avoiding prison because they got good lawyers. So there's another piece going with that. So our guest tonight, and you can look up their site if you're online at www.redlodgetransition.org. Trish Jordon to my immediate right, Myrna Taylor, and then Brandy Lawver from Red Lodge Transition Services. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate you having us today.
So one of the usual questions is, you know, where are you from? Why did you come to Oregon? Et cetera, et cetera. And you could also give, as is standard in Indian country, your tribal affiliation if you want to do that.
Okay. Well, my name is Trish Jordon. My mother is Creek. My father is Miccosukee. My spiritual name is Takchawayushkiwea, and I belong to the Turtle Clan. Okay. And that's how we introduce ourselves as Native people. It's important to know who you are and where you come from. I came to Oregon to work with women in prison. I started working with women in prison about 8 years ago when they had women at EOCI, which is in Pendleton. And at that time I lived in Idaho. And I'm a religious service volunteer for the Oregon Department of Corrections. And I thought about it a long time, and I prayed about it, and I decided that I could give up 1 day a month for these women. And so I would go 1 day a month to run the sweat lodge ceremony for them. Okay. And then when they moved the women to Wilsonville, which is just south of Portland, the administrator of religious services asked me to help them design and implement the new Native American religious service program at Coffee Creek, because all the women in the state of Oregon are now at one prison. And I said, okay.
Why did they decide to do that?
Why did they decide to move them?
Well, here's why I asked that, and correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. first to give, I mean, I think it's to their credit that they're even putting native spirituality on the level of the Abrahamic religions, because they don't usually do that, right? Because you don't necessarily have the standing of the Catholics or, you know, the Muslims or, you know, et cetera, right? So to even put them on the same standing is a good thing, in one sense, whether they understand what you're doing or not.
Right.
So that's good.
Well, under the Constitution, we are guaranteed the right to practice our religion.
Nations. Yes, you are.
And, you know, the Freedom of Religion Act guarantees us that right. And as tribes, we are sovereign nations. And we do interact with the Department of Corrections on a government-to-government basis. We have the ability to do that. Now, the Department of Corrections doesn't really truly understand the level that tribes actually have in regard to government.
Yes.
And I am going to be doing some instruction with them next week in regard to that, because we have some women that are being denied their rights, basically, I believe. So we do a lot of public education, not only with the Department of Corrections, but with the public, of course. And we try and break down stereotypes. You know, there's a lot of stereotyping and fears that continue to be generated. You turn on your TV, and what do you see about prison? You see fear shows.
Yeah, right.
You know, you see these big burly guys that would kill you just as soon look at you. The majority of people in prison, that's not who they are. That's maybe 1 to 2% of the population that is in prison. If you came with me into the women's prison and we sat down in a room and we started conversing with these ladies, you would forget where you were. Because they are just like anybody else's neighbors, you know. They are our neighbors. And so all this fear that continues to be generated, it really creates barriers to the reentry process. And so anytime we do an event, we take that opportunity to talk to people and try and dispel their fears. Yes, there are some safety issues that come into play in regard to working with people in prison, or, you know, working with someone that, you know, has a violent history. But the majority of women are not there for violent crimes. And the majority of women are incarcerated. Probably 90% of them have alcohol and drug abuse, substance issues behind their crime. Or they untreated, of course.
And there's no treatment in prison.
They do have a treatment unit at the women's prison. You have to be on the minimum unit. You have to apply. The waiting list is long, and it's what, 2-3% of the population, I believe, that is able to access treatment.
I'm sorry. You said they have to apply.
They have to apply to get into the treatment. If you're in medium...
They don't do an assessment on intake?
They do a 360-some question assessment on intake, but what's ever done with that data, I don't know.
And that's not done for everybody. A lot of times that gets slid by, you know, and the system, it's by lottery. So if you apply... You have a very slim chance. It's by lottery. They will pick your SID number out of a hat, basically, and that will tell you whether or not you'll be able to access treatment. Other than that, there's NA and AA.
I'm suppressing a slight sense of outrage, so bear with me. For what other medical condition does a person have to self-identify? I mean, you know, you're diabetic and you're in prison, they have to treat you, right? And you're assessed. Your crime involves, as you said, behind their crimes is substance abuse. That shows up as part of record. I've seen that at the juvenile level, which, you know, looking at what happens with juveniles of color in the Lane County system, noticing that once those kids who have clear alcohol and drug involvement and go untreated in the juvenile system, and then it's a free fall into the adult system, why do we have waiting lists? Why are we picked at random? Why is there not an assessment for severity? And you know, because if they had cancer, would they let that go untreated?
Oh, wow.
Possibly.
That's a lot of question.
Well, okay.
That's a
Possibly.
lot of
So, I mean,
question.
again,
Yeah.
so I mean, people might have thought that I'm pursuing some political agenda by putting socio-structural violence, but I'm asking these questions because
Right.
it's a medical condition, and
Sure
where do you get that level of not knowing, ignoring it, picking stuff, you get treatment, you don't?
It
Yeah.
comes down to economy. I mean, it's
Okay.
a matter of economy and where the money's spent. And, you know, as taxpayers, we really don't have any say as far as where our money's spent within the correction system.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the programs that were in place in the 70s and 80s have been cut. Anytime you introduce programming into a correctional facility, you reduce recidivism. We have the statistics to prove that. Unfortunately, the majority of programs that are there to teach people new skills, to address alcohol and drug addiction, I don't even know of any programs that are being utilized for violent offenders, you know, and dealing with the violence issue. Anytime you introduce programming, you will help to reduce the rates of people coming back into prison, because, you know, the prison is just a symptom.
Yeah.
That's a symptom of all these other issues that are going on outside here in the society. And what takes place in prison, it flows out into our communities. It is not this tucked away place that we don't have to deal with. We want to believe that those people are there and they get what they deserve, and they don't deserve medical care. I've had people tell me they don't deserve medical care, they don't deserve anything, give them bread and water. I mean, that's still a very common attitude that a lot of people have. And so we work really, really hard to dispel those attitudes and those fears in people, and we have to do it at a community level. And so that's where Red Lodge came into play.
You're volunteers.
We are. We are. We have about 40 volunteers throughout the whole state of Oregon. And because we're Native people and we all know each other and we know how to network, I mean, I'm trying to encourage the Department of Corrections to use us as a pilot project, you know.
Yeah.
Give us some funding and let's see what we can do. You know, let's see what we can do to reduce recidivism. Let's see what we can do to improve people's lives so these women can get out of prison and get jobs and get their children back and be productive citizens. That's what they want. You know, they don't want to live that. You know, the majority of them don't want to live the life that they did before they came to prison. And so it's a very complex situation. It's huge. It's huge. And when we first started this, we're like, oh my gosh, where do we even start? We're starting with the women. And it's been beautiful. I mean, it's wonderful how people come into our lives, and everybody that we talk to, you know, it opens another door for us. And just like, you know, being here today, what a wonderful opportunity, what a great experience.
So, Myrna, what's your connection in all this?
Well, I'm a former inmate. I spent 3 years at Coffee Creek, and like a lot of Native people, I grew up around nobody. My mother is Caucasian, and So the first time that I really connected with the Native people was in Coffee Creek, and it was with Trish. And it was so life-changing. The ceremony was so much, it filled up everything that I had ever needed inside me. The sweat, we had spring feast. Being around Native people, drumming, it just brought me home. When I sat in the lodge, I knew I was home, and I knew where I belonged for the first time. And you know, I'm not that young, so it took me a long time to find that place. I searched a long time. So when I got out, I wanted to do everything that I could do, because I'm not, I don't know, I guess if you had known me before I went to prison, nobody would expect me to go to prison. I was a stay-at-home mom. I homeschooled my children for 10 years. I was married for almost 25 years before my husband passed away. I volunteered in my community, you know, and then ended up going to prison. And I found there an amazing world. I'm still surprised. I assumed, I think like most people, that as much tax money as I paid, they're taken care of. People are taken care of. Their basic needs are met. They're having counseling for issues, and what I found was just the exact opposite. Yeah. It's basically nothing but a warehouse.
A soul-destroying warehouse at that.
Yes.
I mean,
absolutely.
Because I noticed from the website, and other people have talked about that, or previous guests in recovery, it's like, okay, this place is designed to destroy your spirit.
Yes.
So, I mean, so the focus on spirit, even though on your website you talk in order physical, emotional, mental needs, and spiritual being last, well, you identified as a spiritual person up front, right? And that's your entrance into the place. And
I really appreciate that point, because I'm going to go home and change that on the website, because the spiritual piece does belong first, and it is the foundation of which we build. Our organization is founded on a holistic model, and we, you know, a lot of us that work for Red Lodge, we've worked with men and women in prison for years, and when we sat down to design this model, it was amazing to see how it all came together, and how everything needs to interconnect. And the spirituality, I mean, that's what carries you through. That's what's going to get you through that place. And that's what's going to get you through your recovery. And that's what's going to get you through all the struggles that you have to look forward to in your life. It doesn't matter what religion you are. You know, spirituality and religion are two different things, and we do teach that to people. Our religion, how we choose to pray, is no different, or it's no better or worse than anyone else's, but it's what works for us. And there's plenty of statistical evidence out there to show you that you need cultural identification and appropriate programming and materials to reach people of color, people of different minority backgrounds. That's what they're going to identify with. And you know, one of the reasons why we have so many people in prison, it's related to the intergenerational trauma, and we really don't have time to talk to that today.
Oh, we can go there. I mean, because, you know, the reason that we can go there is because, you know, we have talked about that on this show before. We talk about that on my class. You know, it's like, you can even go to my Recovery Center website and say, okay, look, there's a reason why you have the 12 steps of the sacred pipe. Okay, talked about by Charlotte Castle Davis. And it's not a simple adaptation of the 12 steps of NA into Indian country. It's a completely different worldview. So since, you know, when we talk about a multi-generational trauma or intergenerational trauma, when major, you know, portions of the United States government, if not the state of Oregon, were actively, for a large part of the time, trying to essentially make Indians white. I mean, that was the stated purpose of Indian education, is to kill the Indian and save the man, make him Mormon, make him fundamentalist Christian, make him whatever.
The melting pot theory, the boarding school era.
All that.
You know, most people don't understand that our grandparents were pulled away from their families and put on trains and sent 100 to 200 miles away. Their hair was cut, which meant they were now orphans because we cut our hair when someone dies, so they figured their parents must be dead. They must have killed my parents when they put me on the train.
And the people who did this were often, you know, subcontractors, church subcontractors for the government, who not only sexually abused them, but actually told their parents their kids were dead, too.
They did that in some instances. I mean, the traumas that people lived through and the brainwashing mentality that went into trying to make Native people into white people it's horrifying, you know. And so some of the elders, they've shared those pieces with us. And so we understand where that grief and where that trauma has come from. And what people don't understand it in regard to intergenerational trauma is that we carry that through our DNA. All of our ancestors we carry through our DNA. And so we have this connection. And even though we didn't personally suffer it, we still carry it. And so sometimes, you know, you might get really sad and you don't even know where that came from. And it could possibly be that intergenerational trauma that is bringing that up. And, you know, you can separate twins and they're still going to have this connection to one another. Right. So
she ain't just making that up, folks. It ain't just, you know, natives being mystic. That is actually backed up by even Western science. Yes. So not that we needed that to validate, but, you know, it's part of a body of community-defined evidence. I mean, it's just as simple as, look, in an animal like a spider, spiders know how to make webs without meeting their parents. How do they do that? We call that instinct. Well, what that means is that the DNA code is transmitting the wisdom of prior generations. So if that's so in spiders, why wouldn't that be in human beings? And so this is what our teachings have told us anyway.
Yes. So. And one of our elders, Tyler Barlow, he's involved in the Red Lodge. He's been involved since the beginning. He was actually a chaplain for the Oregon Department of Corrections at the time when we established Red Lodge. So he was able to open a lot of doors for us, and he was able to open a lot of the programming that we've been able to bring in to the Oregon Department of Corrections. We just got through with our spring celebration feast where we bring in the sacred foods, which, by the way, the Department of Corrections didn't want us to bring in. That's another story for another day.
Those and, we don't have to talk about why they wouldn't. Why?
Because.
Well, what are the sacred foods?
Okay. There are many sacred foods, but in regard to the people of the Longhouse who are indigenous to this area, the fish, the meat, the roots, and the berries always get set on the table. And so the salmon, these are our new foods, and this is what we feed our spirits. And when I first started working with these women over at EOCI, and some of them were almost shells. And I see a lot of people that are just shells in prison, but these women were just pitiful. And I said to the chaplain, I said, we need to feed them. We need to spiritually feed them with these foods. We need to feed them with these ceremonies and this. We don't separate our food from our ceremony. Right. That's so an integral part of what we do. And so he told me it will never happen. You'll never bring this food into the prison. We do not allow people to bring outside food because they might put something in it, because they might get sick. I'm like, but you don't understand. And I did that a lot, but you don't understand. And finally I got to the point where it doesn't matter if they don't understand. This is a freedom of religion issue, and
you're a tribal, you're a sovereign nation. Hello.
We need to feed these people. And so we just practiced our 4th year of spring celebration at the women's prison. We are the only prison in Oregon that has been allowed to bring in the sacred foods. And we have established that precedence, and we will be opening it up to the men's prisons. And I can tell you, it's a life-saving experience for our women to be fed in this way and have the Simnasho Longhouse come and perform this ceremony for them. And they're crying. They're so emotional. They're crying when we're done, and all of this stuff that's been lifted off of them. It's huge. It's healing, and so we are doing the work. We've been doing the work for a long time, and we will continue to do the work. But it's a real struggle because we're dealing with people who they don't care. You know, everything's in black and white, and this is the way it is, and you won't do it this way. That's not what works for us. And so it's a continual push, it's a continual struggle to make sure that we are able to maintain authentic Native American ceremony and programming within our prisons.
Well, when Trish comes in and the elders come in, I was privileged to attend 2 of them. 2 of the ceremonies, and then the sweat. That's the only time when you're there that you feel normal. That's the only time that you feel like you're a human being. It's life-changing. It changes everything. You can tell when you go back to the unit. The women come back in and will be dispersed in minimum. We're in great big rooms, big warehouses, and you can feel the different spirit. We're calm. It's like when she comes in for sweat once a month, that carries you to the next month. You remember that. You remember what it was like. You pray about it. You think about it during your morning prayers, during the night when you lay down. You think about the things that were said, the songs that were sung. That's what gives you some hope, because it really is a hopeless place. It's very black, very full of despair, very ugly. So when those ceremonies are brought in, I know that DOC doesn't understand how important they are. They don't have a clue. People can go to churches, you know, once a week or twice a week. But when you have a ceremony like that, that's what our spirit cries for. It doesn't cry to go to the church. It cries for our ancestors. And you receive that when you go into ceremony. And to know, that I once told, because I was brought up in a white society, I told a friend of mine, I don't know where I belong. Who am I? I don't have a clue where I belong. And he told me, he said, well, you might not know, but I know. You're a Native woman. And that has made all the difference to me, because I can claim that. That is mine. I don't have to say, well, my dad was, I can say, yes, I'm a Native woman, period, and I will leave it at that. Just given that, and even amongst the Native women that I've become, I just love them, they're my friends. Most of them, even if they were raised on the res, were not brought up around ceremony because of that intergenerational trauma. So it doesn't matter
The res
whether
was
we're
not your tribe. I mean, the res is not a village.
exactly.
Okay? I mean, it's
exactly.
it's a concentration camp.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the idea behind it.
And we have to get back to that idea of Native community. That again is the thing that will hold us together. It's like Trish was saying, everything is interconnected and all of it helps. The ceremonies, the medicine, all of the medicines that we have. Learning our own words, being able to speak some of our, at least being able to say a prayer in our own language. Right. Singing songs, all of that will bring you back. And we were talking on the way up here.
Amazingly how quickly, too.
It's, for me, it was instant. It's, I'm home. This is where I belong. I am a Native woman.
So, if I may focus, because I know that at some point we theoretically may switch you out,
Yes.
so I want to get as much camera time with you as possible. So, you were a stay-at-home mom for a while. Whatever
Yeah.
happened to get you into prison, you introduced to Native ways, if I understand you
Yes.
correctly, in prison.
Yes.
And that helped you with your transition out, and you haven't
Absolutely.
been back.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that this pattern is repeated over and over, and that recidivism drops to zero as a result of these. I mean, it's obviously helped you with your transition. You're saved.
Well, I know where to go.
Yeah.
I know where to go and what to do now, and I didn't before. Nothing else filled that up.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I had losses and I had tragedies, there was no place for me to go. I didn't realize, you know. And so actually, for me, the prison experience was not a blessing, but actually being there was. It was one of the greatest events of my life. I can't imagine now never having gone and learned what I have learned. I would do it again just to learn who I am as a Native woman.
I think what we need to clarify here is the majority of the women that we work with in prison, they have been removed from ceremony because of the alcohol and the drug addictions, you know, 2 generations, some of them. Out of respect of that ceremony, their families removed themselves and they put away their sacred items. They put away these things that that connect the spirit and the mind and the body. So what we give back to them in regard to that, is priceless. They are able to come home, as Myrna said, and we see tremendous changes happening with these women. But what we do in the prisons is not enough. We have to carry that out onto back into our communities and on the outside, and we have to give people the support that they need in order to make it. Otherwise, they're going back. And we want to prevent our people from going back to prison. We want to prevent our youth from going to prison. And so we see what we do as a prevention, not just reducing recidivism, but as preventing intergenerational incarceration.
It's a new twist. Sup, Brandy?
Hello.
Tell us your story.
My name is Brandy Lawver, and I'm a Klamath and Modoc from Klamath Falls. I was incarcerated at Coffee Creek for 35 months. I've been out since October, and it's been hard. It's been very hard.
Brandy was one of the lucky ones. Brandy went through the treatment program.
Magically picked from the lottery.
Right. It was actually a court order that I was mandated to do treatment. So I finished. It was a 6-month program, 14-hour days, but it cut 17 months off my sentence. I completed and was released in October when I was actually scheduled 2009. So it was hard getting out. I felt discouraged and a little naive about getting out.
What so? In what way?
My family offered me to let them come and live with them in Lake Oswego, which is right outside of Portland, instead of going back to Klamath Falls. And I took it. I went, and I thought that maybe if I was in a new place, things would be easier.
A geographic, as they say in the program.
Right, and I was completely wrong. Had a hard time finding a job because of the background checks. I couldn't pass a background check. My PO told me that maybe I needed to lower my standards. And that
your PO said that?
Yeah, that I needed to lower my standards, and that she thought that Subway was hiring.
Brandy is educated. Brandy is one of the few ladies that we have that is truly educated. She's extremely bright. I hope to get her into school. She filled out probably 100 applications, and she really did try and get a job. She really did try.
In and around Lake Oswego?
In the Portland area. Well,
Portland.
I started straight. I don't know the Portland area, but I had no choice.
Yeah.
So I had to. I'm getting used to it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I'm running into the problem of housing. And now I couldn't find a job at first, and now it's coming into rental problems. I was told that they need to think of the safety of their other tenants, and they wouldn't be able to.
Was your beef violent?
I was convicted of 2 counts of assaultery, yes.
So, this is just me coming from Los Angeles and living in Oregon for 25 years. And among my family, we refer to Lake Oswego as Lake No Negro. So, yeah, I mean, right, the whole, employment thing is one thing, the housing thing. And,
Right.
Background check is one thing, but a brown person is
Right.
another.
And
And
we are
it
the
is
only
Lake
Native
Oswego, and it is Portland, et cetera, et cetera. So depending, we can't pretend that Oregon is without prejudice. We cannot pretend that. So
They make it very apparent.
yes, yeah,
Very
they
apparent.
do. And so minority with a record, right?
Right. I've been turned down for an interview because hiring me would be a liability to them, and that was kind of. I think I called Trish crying on that one.
And that was for like an insurance job, doing insurance paperwork. And how is that? How is she a liability?
You don't have the front office look.
Assault 3. I mean, that sounds concerning. But yet, if you actually listen to her story and what that was all about, things happen, and her issue was racially motivated, and for a lot of our women,
Well, in self-defense, it was racially motivated, or what do you mean?
It was racially motivated towards my children. My children are half black, and a woman who was with my brother had said some things. She had been in my home with my children, and it's a very long story, but in a nutshell, it's.
A woman that had issues with your black children?
Yes.
And one assumes that she, of course, is not black, and
Right.
there might be some stereotypically demographic things we could assume about her
Right.
having issues. So you get the assault 3, and her making racial comments about your children is ignored.
Correct.
Oh, it's Oregon. Right. We beat black people over the head with baseball bats, and the police are hesitant to say that's racially motivated, and nothing was stolen. Excuse me. Yeah. Okay. So these are some of the socio-structural violence things that get placed here. Not to keep skipping that CD, but I mean, how do you approach that spiritually in terms of dealing with?
And there was alcohol involved in Brandy's
Yes.
crime.
Sure.
And I think that Brandy deserves to be recognized for the fact that she has stayed clean and sober. She has
Behind
to call
all this,
in behind all of the she's had tremendous pressure put on her. I honestly don't know how some of them do it. But she stayed clean and sober, and every day she has to call in, and she's given a color, and if her color comes up, she has to make her way from Beaverton clear over to Oregon City on the bus before 7 o'clock to do a UA. And if she doesn't, she's in violation. Now, one time she forgot to call in, and that was a violation. Every day, she wasn't involved in drugs. That's not the issue.
Right.
It's alcohol.
Right.
Now, we have people that went to prison that don't even have to do UAs, and their crime, it was involved in alcohol and drugs. So it's a real hit and miss in regard to what your parole officer determines, you should have to do in regard to your follow-up. And even after all these months of, 8 months, I think it's been, I mean, she's still having to call in every day. And I went down with her to her parole officer's appointment, about a month and a half ago? Because I was going to talk to him about it, cut her some slack. She's doing great, let's take a little bit of the stress off here. And we sat there for 20, 30 minutes before we were finally told that the parole officer wasn't even in that day. And this was the parole officer calling Brandy the day before to confirm the appointment. So a lot of times people take off work, they rush down there, they wait and wait and wait, and then their PO isn't even there.
And so then if you were employed, then what does that do to the stability of your job?
Exactly. And the employer doesn't like you taking that time off.
Right.
Why don't you just pay?
Are you only getting UA'd for alcohol?
Everything. Every substance abuse they can actually UA you for.
I think the technology is we can do under-the-tongue strips for that now, which means if the PO has a state car that can drive to your site and test you on site, you don't have to go in.
Yeah.
This is the 21st century, is it not? The state of corrections, the Oregon Department of Corrections is in the 21st century, are they? Oh, maybe they're not.
Well, it's a waste of money. It's a waste of resources. Not only is it expensive to do the testing in that manner, but it's expensive for the folks. I mean, look at gas, $1.30 something a gallon. If you did have a car,
where are you getting $1.30 a gallon?
Excuse me, $4.30 a gallon. I mean, it cost me $81 to fill my car up to come down here. My goodness,
Okay.
So, it's expensive, and why isn't there a site near where she works? Why does she have to continue to go clear back to Oregon City?
Yeah, right.
It's because she works in, she works in one county and she has to go back to another county to do it.
She can get tested at the local county office.
Let's put some people some slack and restructure some of this stuff. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. But again, so when the skipping CD piece about the prison industrial complex, are we setting up people for success to keep them out of prison, or are we setting them up to return?
It's set up for a lot of these folks. It's a setup, and I have a lot of examples of that, and I hesitate to share them because I think that people would be they would be appalled to hear some of the stories in regard to how some people are being released from prison.
Do we have time?
So, well, we do have some time. We actually have less than 10 minutes, but time goes fast on television. But if I may offer a suggestion, tribal sovereignty status. I mean, you're enrolled, are you not?
Yes.
All right. So it's nation to state. When you're relating to the state of Oregon as the Klamath Nation. So why can't you simply demand, that some accommodation be made if testing needs to be done in the local county jurisdiction where the person is working, as a simple courtesy?
I think that's a wonderful suggestion, and I wish that we could all get together and help refine that system. But it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's real difficult, you know, and you have a lot of politics involved with the tribe too, and the tribes, you know, they have little time to spend on this issue. They have other things that they're more concerned about.
Okay. So it would seem then part of the spirituality training, or part of the spirituality piece, needs also how to maintain, I guess, from a counselor point of view, you know, stress reduction and skill building in terms of dealing with continued oppressive governments. Because, I mean, you've dealt with the oppression of prison, right?
Right.
Dealt with a certain degree of injustice that got you into prison, and now you're having to deal with a certain level of injustice as part of, you know, being a quote-unquote free member of society, or you paid your debt to society somewhat, and now you're out, but you're still being, you know, asked to jump through these, you know, onerous hoops, really.
Right. I'm curious as to when my debt is actually going to be paid, as far as society is concerned.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when people have gone to prison and they've gone through the probation and parole process and they have completed each and every step and actually achieved that piece of paper stating, you know, I'm free now, right? You still have to put that felony down on your record. It follows you for the rest of your life. It's like being branded with a big F on your forehead.
Yeah.
You never get away from it. And if people have paid their debts to society, I really think that they ought to be able to start over.
Yeah.
So there's so many issues, but one thing that I want to tell you before we go is, you know, our goal is to raise enough money to have a house for these women that are getting out of prison to go to. Over 60% of our women do not have housing to go to, and many of them end up in places like the YWCA down on Burnside, which is not a good place to be. Not to say that the YWCA is, you know, I mean, that's an excellent program and the director there is a wonderful lady, but we want a house that we can work with these ladies. We know how to do alcohol and drug training. We know how to do trauma work. We know how to do parenting. We want to teach them how to cook. We want to teach them how to can. We want to teach them, you know, we want to provide for them a holistic program and get them into school and help them get their kids back and get them into, you know, housing to where they can lead normal and productive lives. 1 out of 3 people will go back to prison in Oregon. The recidivism rate is over 30%, and that has not changed in years. We believe we can do a better job than that.
Probably can. Go to slide. So you can be contacted through this website, www.redlodgetransition.org.
Yes.
And it gives you all the appropriate phone numbers and all that stuff.
Yes. The phone number is probably the best way of getting a hold of us.
Okay, let me put that up right quick. 541?
503
503
245 4175.
4175. Okay, so when he gave me the 2-minute sign, we're wrapping? All right, so if you like what you've seen, that's the quick phone number there, and then go back to me. If you like what you've seen, email us at tell us what you've liked about the program and how you can get in contact with us or our guests. You can email us at liveclass@lanecc.edu. I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you for letting us be
sharing
here.
your program, and we'll try and get you some more assistance and another slot in the future, too.
That would be wonderful.
It's been great. So this is, I'm signing off for DiversiTV for the end of season 4. It's been great. See you in October, I believe it is, yes. And you can catch us in reruns Wednesday nights and Saturday nights, 6 to 7.